Think everything you know about the raptor is a lie programmed into you by Hollywood. You picture a 6-foot predator with a curved claw on its foot. You imagine the velociraptor from the films. You assume the greatest killing machines were the heaviest. The T-Rex. The Spinosaurus. The brutes that shook the earth when they walked. You are wrong about all of it. In the coastal wetlands of Cretaceous Patagonia, something else was hunting. Something that breaks every rule you think you understand about apex predators. The locals who found its bones gave it a name before paleontologists could classify it. They called it MIP. The shadow of death that kills with cold wind. They were not being poetic. The MIP's primary claw measures 37.5 centimeters. That is 15 inches. The length of a standard classroom ruler. The length of a cold-forged Bowie knife. And here is where your programming fails you. That claw was not on the foot. It was on the hand. This creature did not kick. It reached. The Megaraptorans, the family to which MIP belongs, represent a lineage that dominated the southern continents for 84 million years. That is longer than the T-Rex existed. Longer than the Spinosaurus ruled. Longer than the Himalayas have been standing. And yet you have never heard of them. Consider the weight paradox. A 20-foot Australovenator, a close relative of the MIP, weighed 310 kilograms. That is 680 pounds. The weight of a few large motorcycles. Not a truck. Not a tank. A creature the length of a shipping container that weighs less than a grand piano. This should not be possible. Nature does not allow 30-foot predators to weigh less than a Toyota Camry. But here is what does not make sense. These creatures were not T-Rexes. They were not velociraptors. They share almost nothing with the predators you think you know. So whose blueprint were they following? To understand what made them, you have to understand what they were made of. The 15-inch measurement is bone. The fossilized record of what once existed. But in life, that bone was sheathed in keratin, the same material as your fingernails, but engineered to a lethal edge. That keratinous sheath added 30% more length. 30% more cutting surface. A carbon fiber blade guard wrapped around a surgical instrument. The result was not a claw. It was a weapon system. The MIP's hand operated on a double sword grip architecture. The first and second fingers locked into a precision-piercing position, a hydraulic crane system designed not just to stab, but to penetrate and lift. The shoulder girdle rotated with the flexibility of an industrial conveyor arm, allowing vertical movement that no other predator could replicate. And here is where the horror becomes real. They did not eat like the T-Rex. They did not bite and shake and tear. They skewered. A creature the size of a human, standing upright, aware of what was happening, would be pierced through the abdomen by twin 15-inch blades. Then lifted. Raised to the mouth like a slice of pizza held by the crust. Consumed alive. Piece by piece. This is not speculation. This is the biomechanical reality of the feeding apparatus. But the claws are not the true marvel. The true marvel is what made them possible. The word is pneumatization. The presence of air-filled cavities in bones. You might call it hollow bones. You would be understating the engineering. This is why they moved the way they moved. This is why they struck the way they struck. They did not fight against gravity. They ignored it. An airframe this light should be fragile. It should be prey. So why did this design dominate for 84 million years? The answer resolves the question you have been holding since the beginning. Whose blueprint were they following? No one's. The Megaraptorans were not copying the T-Rex. They were not copying the Velociraptor. They were an evolutionary experiment that worked so well, nature never found a reason to replace it. For 84 million years, longer than the T-Rex family existed, longer than the Spinosaurus lineage survived, this design hunted without competition. They watched the Carcharodontosaurids rise and fall. They witnessed extinction events that erased entire families of predators. And they kept hunting. They were not a variation on a theme. They were the prototype that needed no sequel. The saturated wetlands of the late Cretaceous were not forests. They were not plains. They were labyrinths. A network of rivers, estuaries, and coastal thickets where visibility collapsed within meters and movement was channeled through narrow corridors of vegetation. Feel the pressure of that humid air against your skin. The weight of water vapor so dense it coats the lungs with every breath. The temperature of pre-dawn, that liminal hour when the cold has not yet lifted and the warmth has not yet arrived. The time when shadows still rule. Now feel the darkness. Not the absence of light, but what darkness does to a body that relies on sight. Your pupils dilate to their maximum. Your peripheral vision becomes a blur of shapes without edges. You freeze. You listen. And then you feel the cold wind. Not a breeze. Not a gust. A localized displacement of air pressure that moves across your neck. Something is near you. Something large enough to push atmosphere as it passes. But there are no footsteps. No vibrations through the ground. No warning. This is the physics of a 1-ton predator built like a ghost. The pneumatic skeleton produces no ground resonance. The lightweight frame generates no thudding impact. You do not hear it coming. You feel the air move before the blade enters. The indigenous name was not mythology. It was accurate observation encoded in language. Ma-IP. The shadow of death that kills with cold wind. And then comes the sensation that no human should have to imagine. The localized pressure of twin 30-centimeter blades piercing through the viscera. The moment of lift, your feet leaving the ground as hydraulic shoulders raise your body toward a waiting mouth. The realization that you are not being killed. You are being eaten. For 84 million years, this was the apex reality of the southern continents. Not the brute force of jaws. The surgical precision of hands made of knives. And what ended them? Not competition. Not starvation. Not disease. A 10-kilometer asteroid. The only force capable of stopping this design was not biological. It was geological. Planetary. The kind of intervention that rewrites the rules of existence for every living thing simultaneously. For 84 million years, the Megaraptorans faced every challenger evolution could produce. They outlasted them all. They were only erased when the planet itself was wounded. Here is what this means for everything you thought you understood about power. Humanity views strength as mass and muscle. The predator that wins is the predator that weighs more, bites harder, roars louder. This is your programming. This is your assumption. The Megaraptoran rejects this entirely. Power is not weight. Power is the absence of weight. Speed is not noise. Speed is silence. Strength is not bulk. Strength is precision applied with surgical intent across 84 million years of unbroken dominance. You believe you are the masters of tool use. You sharpened sticks 2 million years ago and called it revolution. The Megaraptoran evolved its tools into its own anatomy 150 million years before you existed. It did not carry weapons. It was the weapon. And now the callback becomes clear. The shadow of death that kills with cold wind was never a legend. It was a literal description of biomechanical reality. A predator so light, so hollow, so perfectly engineered for silence, that the only warning was the atmospheric displacement of its passing. The cold wind against your skin. The last sensation before the hands of knives did their work. Ancient humans described a creature they never saw with more precision than your Hollywood programming ever could. Which leaves one question that paleontology cannot answer. One question that sits at the intersection of biology and philosophy. If the meteor had never fallen. If the skies had never burned and the long winter had never come. If evolution had been allowed to continue its experiments without interruption. Would nature have ever found a reason to replace a design this perfect?